This is from my sophomore year of high school. Take in mind that some of the reasons why the whole scenario lasted so long was because I was extremely shy and was having problems with extreme anxiety. This whole experience has helped me learn to speak up for myself. It was the beginning of the school year and I had a gym class as my first period. I went to class normally for a few days, but I had noticed that some girl had been staring at me off and on. I didn't think it was anything to worry about, a big mistake on my part. One day before class started, we were all hanging out in one corner of the gym listening to our teacher's story of how he tripped and fell in a huge puddle of mud. I was sitting on a pile of yoga mats, staring off into space but still paying attention. I then heard a girl's voice say, "Teacher, I have a story to tell too. I finally have found my best friend that I haven't seen in years and she doesn't even recognize me." I was snapped out of my staring spell and looked towards the voice to find that she was pointing directly at me. I foolishly said, "Oh no, I remember you," and read off the name that was written across her gym shirt, Ellie, because I didn't want to seem like a jerk for not remembering her. Ellie instantly brightened up that I remembered her, and then proceeded to lift herself up onto the yoga mats and sit uncomfortably close to me, enough that our entire bodies were squished together. I didn't say anything because I didn't feel it was necessary to cause a huge problem out of this, because there was obviously something up with her mentally, and I didn't want to be a jerk about it. The class went on, and Ellie and I were not in the same group, so I didn't have any problem with her that day. The next few days we didn't have any assigned class groups, so Ellie would trail behind me like a dog. She was starting to get extremely protective and forceful with me. I don't get cold very easily, but she insisted that I wear her jacket and would not leave me alone until I finally wore it. She also started to say things about hurting my actual friends, which was the final straw for me. Do whatever you want to me, but as soon as you bring my friends into it, I'm going to do something about it. I was finally going to bring it up to our principal. Putting that whole thing behind, our class today had the option of either volleyball or walking around the perimeter of the room. I decided to just walk around the room, and had been doing that for around 15 minutes, until I sat on the ground by the bleachers to tie my shoes. Ellie dropped down to the ground too and watched me with extreme interest. All of a sudden, she grabbed my wrist and held our forearms together. "We have the same veins, you want to know why? Because we were in the womb together. I used to hug you when you were scared in the womb," she said. This line freaked me out a lot at the time. Our veins looked nothing alike. She had one visible vein while mine branched out into multiple. We looked nothing alike, and she was a year older than me. I decided to run off to the bathroom before I really freaked out and stayed in there for almost the rest of the class. I returned later for the end of class roll call and left to go to the locker room. Ellie got dressed quickly and was just staring at me half naked, getting dressed. It made me really uncomfortable. I lied and told her that I had to leave quickly because I had to meet up with my boss at Olive Garden and hightailed it out of there to my next class. My next class teacher, who I trust dearly, had called me up to talk to her privately in her class, and she told me, "Ellie has been talking about me nonstop in the class that she has her in." She recommended that I go to the police as soon as possible and said she'd talk to the principal. This scared the hell out of me. What in the absolute hell did my teacher know about Ellie that she would tell me to go to the police of all people? I called my mom and skipped the rest of the day. I stayed home the next day and went to the police station with my mom. They brought us into a room and I started off by just telling them the basic story of what was going on. I didn't even say her name. The guy that was talking to us said, "Ellie Smith." I was dumbfounded. How did he know exactly who I was talking about? He went on talking about how she's in the police station a lot but couldn't go into specifics because she was a minor. This didn't help with my anxiety. What the hell did she do to be in the police station multiple times? The police couldn't really do anything, so the only thing I could do was switch my class. I was pissed off because I had made a few good friends in that gym class and had to restart with a whole new class, but at least I was away from Ellie. The new class went fine, but over the course of the year, I would always run into Ellie in the halls. My friend even saw her turn around and look at me with one of the most terrifying faces she had ever seen in real life. She would always yell things along the lines of, "I'm going to get you," which was extremely unnerving to me. I didn't want her near me or my friends, so I began stepping up and telling the vice principal himself whenever one of these instances occurred. This kept happening over the course of my sophomore year. I was hoping that she would forget about me because I had figured out that we had never actually met before that gym class. I never hung out with anyone other than my friend Paige in the time Ellie said we were best friends, and I even checked all my yearbooks. Not one thing even mentioning Ellie Smith. The morning of the first day of junior year, I ran into her before I even started my first class. I tried not to make eye contact. Later that day, the principal called me in and told me that Ellie said I flipped her off. I didn't even look at her. This whole game with threats and random incoherent screeches continued through my junior year as well. And I feel like part of the whole high school experience was taken from me because I spent a lot of the time trying to figure out how to avoid her. She graduated and thankfully was gone during my senior year. This whole experience has honestly both traumatized me and helped me grow as a person. I had learned how to assert myself more than I have ever done before, but I still swear I see her out of the corner of my eye. It's caused some paranoia that still hasn't gone completely away. Yeah, so, Ellie Smith, let's not meet again. Edit. I had forgotten to put that at one point she had my phone number that I gave her when I didn't think anything was wrong. I apparently wrote down the wrong number, thank God, and she tried to call me like 35 times. She got very angry and kept repeating, "I'm going to tackle you if you ever do that again," when I saw her in class the next day. I hate to say I have another story to tell. You'll notice it's been a while since this happened, but for legal reasons I was not allowed to talk publicly about it due to the severity of the event. But I have been granted permission to speak publicly about it. There's no news story about it. At least not yet anyway. Here it goes. I'm a 21-year-old male. It was July 4th, 2019. I live in Kansas in the USA. At the time, I worked as a corrections officer at a maximum security prison on the night shift. The cell house I was in charge of was the maximum general population, one man to a cell. This is where murderers, rapists, and overall the worst of society were housed. Before work, I was doing the typical American 4th of July thing. Grilling, blowing up fireworks, had a beer or two, having a great time with my now wife and family. My wife kept telling me I needed to just call in sick and take the day without pay. I said no because we were a little behind on bills. I really wish I had listened to her now. As the night went on, it came time for us to leave my mom's and for me to go home and get ready for work. I took my wife home and dropped her off, got ready, and left for work. My wife's car was broken down, so she was stuck at home for the night. As I drove to work, which was about an hour drive away, I watched the fireworks going off all around. It was sad. I had never had to work on the 4th before. After I got to work and got all my equipment, I got into my cell house. Business as usual. Inmates were showered and locked up. I got my night cleaning crew out so they could clean the rest of the cell house and met up with my partner for the night in the officer station to get our briefing from the last shift. Fast forward an hour into my shift, so it's now right around 12:30 a.m. Another officer came into the cell house, so now there were 3 of us. This happened often on the night shift as there was nothing to do except rounds every half hour or so. Out of nowhere, we hear an inmate laughing like a witch, like a cackle. That was strange, but nothing to be alarmed about. Drugs were a bad problem in that facility. Still are as far as I know. Eventually, after a few more cackles, I decide to go see who was making the sound in case they were high. I walked through and checked all 200 inmates. Nothing. There were a small few that were even awake, so I brushed it off and just went back to my office. My partner and the other officer were asking if there was anyone that needed their cells searched. I couldn't think of anyone in particular I suspected of having anything, so I went and checked all the cells again to see if I could get a whiff of smoke or see something. As I was walking on the second-story cell run, I found an inmate that was acting weird. He was in his bed facing the wall, talking. This was also common as there were a lot of inmates with minor mental issues. I figured he was high because he turned and looked at me and told me to piss off. I was going to leave him alone, but the disrespect made me change my mind. Time is now 12:40 a.m. July 5th. I walked back to the office and told the other 2 officers which cell he was in and I wanted him searched. Cell 218. So, how the cell house is laid out is there are 100 cells per level. From the officer's station, you can see the north side, first and second floor, but you can't see the south side unless you walk the 50 feet over to it. Picture the movie Shawshank Redemption type cell house, except instead of being able to look through and see cells across, you just see a wall. The cells are literally back to back. As the officers go to pull him out of his cell to search it, I went to the ground floor and was watching from below. The reason why is I wanted to get the inmate on the ground level and not the second floor. All that was there for protection from going over the edge was a handrail. I noticed the inmate was taking forever to get out of his cell. He came out in shorts and a do-rag, which is weird because he wasn't fully clothed. Didn't even put sandals on, just shorts and a do-rag, yet took 5 minutes to get out. That made me nervous. The inmate was a 6-foot-tall, 250-pound muscle-bound dude. Definitely had size on us, so from the ground I holler at him and tell him to come down to the ground, and that he could use the phone or check his email or commissary. He declined my offer, which never happens. I knew something was up. He was watching them search his cell from the control panel box. This was alarming. They were in his cell. I was on the ground. He could have easily ambushed them. He would have made it to them before I could get up the stairs. So to try to keep them safe, I went upstairs to the inmate. He was standing in the corner against the handrails at the top of the stairs. He knew I was the OIC, officer in charge of that cell house, and he knew I was the one that saw him talking to himself. He asked me why I was having his cell searched. I lied. I said, "It's nothing personal, man. I have a quota I have to fill for cells searched in a night, and you were awake so I chose you to have searched. It'll just take a second." He was uneasy. He was pacing. Something wasn't right. Then I saw it. He had turned just right, and I saw in his do-rag the Samsung logo reflecting the cell house light. I knew there was going to be a problem as soon as I saw it. He had a cell phone. I called over the radio for 2 additional officers to come to me. The inmate didn't seem to notice I made the call. My supervisors responded, saying 2 of them were on their way. Side note, at this time only segregation officers had protective vests, so out of the 5 of us that were now in there, only 1 had a vest. I was not that one. The officers were names changed. South had a vest. McCormick, Collins, Sheffield, and me. Time is now 12:58 a.m. As soon as South and McCormick got up to me, I told the inmate to turn around and cuff up. South and McCormick were on the inmate's right side. I was in front of him. "Why?" he angrily asked me. I refused to give him a reason at first. After a few minutes I had enough. I told him, "Look man, I can see the cell phone in your do-rag. You know you're not supposed to have that." The inmate then got a defeated look on his face but fire in his eyes. His body relaxed and he slowly reached up to retrieve the phone. But did he pull out a phone? Nope. He pulled out a 6-inch sharpened metal rod with ripped fabric wrapped around the bottom as a handle. Everything froze for me. I knew I was going to die. Everything started moving again. I now had an inmate twice my size charging me, thrusting quickly and repeatedly towards me. I immediately went into defensive mode, trying to grab his arm and disarm him. His wrist kept slipping. I couldn't keep a hold of it, but at least I managed to block his attempts at my lower abdomen. Suddenly, he aimed high and went for my chest. I felt it make contact. I had just been stabbed in the right part of my chest. "Spray him!" I yelled at the top of my lungs. McCormick was already working on spraying the MK9OC spray. For my military readers, you know what I mean. For others, MK9 comes as a pressured spray bottle about 20 fluid ounces. You can buy it at camping stores in the USA. It's called bear spray. It's the stuff that you spray in bears' eyes so you can get away. South had come up behind the inmate and grabbed him around his chest and pulled him backwards right as McCormick sprayed. I didn't realize it at the time, but the spray hit me and the inmate, and South as well as everyone near us. I was able to turn and run. I ran around the stair railing, past the panel box, and out onto the run of cells on the 2nd story. I ran past a few cells and turned around to see he wasn't chasing me, but South was wrestling him to the ground while gagging on the OC, as was I and McCormick. Sheffield, having heard the commotion, came running out of the cell, saw what was happening, and ran in to help. The inmate grabbed South by the vest and tried to throw him over the end of the landing, but South dropped to his knees before he went over. I grabbed my shoulder mic and screamed into it, "Level a response to Charlie 2 immediately." Dispatch said something back, but I didn't hear it. I started to charge back to help save South. Before I could get away from the cell I was in front of, Collins grabbed me from behind and told me not to go. Due to the layout of the runs, I didn't see, but Sheffield grabbed the inmate from behind and body slammed him on his face and began cuffing him. Sheffield got covered in OC as well, due to the inmate being covered in it. As soon as Collins let me go, I stood still and watched. Up the stairs came 4 more officers, the captain and a lieutenant. The lieutenant came and asked me what happened. I started to explain, but he cut me off after he saw blood coming out of my left arm. After taking me out of the cell house, he made me lift my shirt because he saw the blood. He examined all my wounds. He had me remove all my equipment and hold the paper towels to my arm. I was rushed to the ER. I was able to grab my phone out of my rental car. Had totaled my car a few weeks prior by hitting a deer. I called my wife and told her what happened. She called my parents and siblings. Luckily, my injuries weren't too bad. I was stabbed 4 times. Once on my left arm just below the elbow. That was a through and through. The blade went in one side and out the other. Twice in the top of my left hand. And the one that hit my chest went in the skin and hit one of my ribs, keeping it out of my lungs. Out of 37 plunges, I think it's safe to say I'm lucky to be here writing this story. I didn't sleep for 2 days following the event. I still have nightmares almost daily. I'm always paranoid. After my attack, I was forced to resign for safety reasons. Everyone statewide that works in max prisons now has vests. None of the people from there talk to me anymore. I feel abandoned. I have one guy from that facility that I still see, my sergeant, who wasn't there that night. Court is coming soon to add 3 more attempted murders on the guy. Turns out he was a shot caller for the Crips gang. Stay safe, everyone. If any law enforcement guys read this, watch your 6 and never be afraid to have backup. And to the guy that stabbed me, I hope for your sake that, aside from court, we never meet again.